Elena stood in the softly lit hospital room, her blue nurse's uniform crisp despite the long shift. She held the hand of the elderly man in the bed, his breathing shallow but steady. Behind them, Father Michael held an open prayer book, his gentle voice filling the quiet space. At 28, Elena had seen many patients in their final days, but something about Mr. Harrison touched her heart differently. Perhaps it was his kind eyes, still bright despite his failing body. Perhaps it was the loneliness that surrounded him like a shadow. "Are you certain about this, my dear?" Father Michael asked softly. Pausing in his reading, Elena looked at the man in the bed. Robert Harrison was 72 years old, a widower with no children, facing his last days alone. 3 weeks ago, he had asked her something extraordinary. He wanted to marry before he died, not to be alone when he passed, to have someone hold his hand and bear witness to his final journey. He had offered her money, of course, enough to pay off her nursing school debts and help her struggling mother. But that was not why Elena agreed. She agreed because she understood loneliness, because she knew what it meant to face the world alone, because her calling as a nurse was to bring comfort in the darkest hours. "I am certain," Elena said, squeezing Robert's weathered hand gently. Robert's eyes met hers, gratitude shining through the pain. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice weak but sincere. The ceremony was brief and simple. No grand celebration, no guests beyond the priest and a witness from the hospital staff. Just two people joining together for whatever time remained, offering each other the gift of companionship. When Father Michael pronounced them married, Elena leaned down and kissed Robert's forehead gently. His eyes closed with what looked like peace, perhaps the first peace he had known in months. "Rest now," Elena whispered. "You are not alone anymore." Over the next 2 weeks, Elena spent every free moment at Robert's bedside. Between her regular shifts caring for other patients, she would sit with her husband, holding his hand, reading to him, listening to his stories. Robert told her about his late wife, Margaret, who had died 5 years earlier after 40 years of marriage. He spoke of their dreams of children that never came, of building a life together through joy and sorrow, of the emptiness that consumed him after her death. "I kept working," Robert said one afternoon, his voice barely above a whisper. "Threw myself into it completely. Thought it would fill the void. But you cannot replace love with work, no matter how hard you try." "What kind of work did you do?" Elena asked, genuinely curious. She realized she knew so little about his life before the hospital. A small smile touched Robert's lips. "I helped people in my own way, made sure they received care when they needed it most." Elena assumed he had been a hospital administrator, perhaps, or worked in healthcare management. It explained his gentle understanding of the medical world, his respect for the nurses and doctors who cared for him. As the days passed, Elena noticed Robert's condition declining. Dr. Stevens, the attending physician, pulled her aside one morning with a grave expression. "Elena, I need to speak with you about something important," Dr. Stevens said, glancing toward Robert's room. "There are things you should know about your husband." "His condition is worsening?" Elena asked, her heart heavy. "Yes, but that is not what I need to discuss." Dr. Stevens hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Elena, do you know who Robert Harrison is?" "He is my patient. My husband," Elena said simply. Dr. Stevens shook his head slowly. "He is also the founder and majority owner of the Harrison Health System, this hospital, along with 12 others across the state. Elena, Robert Harrison is one of the wealthiest men in the region." The words did not register immediately. Elena stared at Dr. Stevens, confusion clouding her thoughts. "That cannot be right. He lives so simply. He has no family visiting, no lawyers, no one." "By his choice," Dr. Stevens explained gently. "After his wife died, Robert withdrew from public life. He handed daily operations to a board of directors and spent his time alone. When he became ill, he checked himself into this hospital under minimal fanfare, requesting to be treated like any other patient." Elena's mind raced. The small amount Robert had offered her to help with debts, it was nothing compared to what Dr. Stevens described. He could have offered her millions, could have made grand promises. Instead, he had offered only what she needed and asked only for companionship. Why did he not tell me? Elena asked. Perhaps for the same reason he checked in quietly, Dr. Stevens said. Perhaps he wanted to know that someone cared for him, not for his money. That someone would sit with him, hold his hand, not because of what he owned, but because of who he was. Elena returned to Robert's room with new eyes, but nothing had changed. He was still the lonely old man who needed comfort. He was still her patient, her responsibility, her husband. That evening, as golden light filtered through the curtains, Robert opened his eyes and looked at Elena with unusual clarity. "You know now, don't you?" he asked softly. Elena nodded, taking his hand. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I needed to know," Robert said, his breathing labored. "After Margaret died, people saw only the money. They offered condolences but asked for donations. They expressed concern but wanted board positions. I became invisible behind my wealth." He paused, gathering strength. "When you agreed to marry me, I saw no greed in your eyes, only compassion. You did not ask what I was worth. You asked what I needed. That was worth more than all my money." Tears filled Elena's eyes. "I would have done this anyway. You did not need to offer me anything." "I know," Robert whispered. "That is why I am giving you everything." "What do you mean?" Robert's eyes began to close, his energy fading. "My lawyers will explain. But know this, Elena, you gave an old man the greatest gift. You let him die loved, not alone. You cannot put a price on that." "Robert, please do not talk like this. Save your strength." But Robert was slipping away, his breathing becoming more shallow. Elena pressed the call button for the medical team while holding his hand tightly. "Thank you," Robert breathed, his last words barely audible. "Thank you for seeing me." The room filled with medical staff, but Elena already knew. Robert Harrison took his final breath at 7:42 that evening, his hand held gently in hers, a small smile on his weathered face. The days that followed were a blur. Funeral arrangements, legal meetings, revelations that left Elena reeling. Robert had left her everything. Not just money, though there was more than she could comprehend. He left her controlling interest in the Harrison health system, his estate, his legacy. His will included a letter, written weeks before their marriage, explaining his wishes. He wanted Elena to use his resources to continue his work, to ensure that hospitals remained places of compassion, where patients were treated with dignity regardless of their ability to pay. "You understand what it means to care for people," Robert had written. "You proved that by agreeing to marry a dying stranger, asking nothing in return. That is the kind of person who should decide how healing happens. Not businessmen focused on profit, but healers focused on people." Elena sat in the lawyer's office, overwhelmed by the responsibility. "I am just a nurse. I do not know how to run a hospital system." The lawyer, an elderly man who had known Robert for decades, smiled gently. Mr. Harrison anticipated that concern. He left detailed instructions, appointed advisors to guide you, created a structure to support your decisions. But he wanted you, with your compassion and your understanding, to be the heart of it all. "Why me?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because you held his hand," the lawyer said simply. "Because when he was dying and alone, you sat with him. Not for money, not for recognition, because it was the right thing to do." That is the kind of person Robert wanted to carry on his life's work. In the months that followed, Elena stepped into her new role with the same dedication she had brought to nursing. She continued working shifts at the hospital, refusing to abandon her patients, while slowly learning to lead the larger organization. She implemented changes Robert had dreamed of. Free clinics for the uninsured, better pay for nurses and support staff, policies that prioritized patient care over profit margins. Some board members resisted, but Elena held firm, guided by the values that had led her to Robert's bedside in the first place. 1 year after Robert's death, Elena stood before the staff of Harrison Memorial Hospital. They were dedicating a new wing for palliative care, a place where patients in their final days could receive comfort and dignity. "My husband taught me something important," Elena said, her voice steady and strong. "He taught me that wealth is not measured in money but in human connection. He gave me resources, yes, but more importantly, he gave me purpose. He showed me that one person reaching out with compassion can change everything. She paused, looking around the room at the doctors, nurses, and staff who made healing possible every day. This wing is named for Margaret Harrison, the wife Robert loved and lost. But it exists because of all of you who show up every day to sit with the suffering, to hold hands in the darkness, to remind people they are not alone. That is the real wealth of this hospital. That evening, Elena visited Robert's grave, something she did every week. She told him about the new wing, about the changes taking hold, about her hopes and fears for the future. "I miss you," she said softly, placing fresh flowers by his headstone. "I wish we had more time. I wish you could see what we are building in your name." The wind rustled through the trees, and Elena felt a sense of peace. Robert had given her an extraordinary gift, not just in wealth but in purpose. He had shown her that one act of kindness, one choice to see another person's humanity, could ripple outward in ways impossible to imagine. As she walked back to her car, Elena thought about the young nurse she had been a year ago, struggling with debt and wondering if she made a difference. That woman had agreed to marry a dying stranger for a small sum of money and the chance to ease someone's final days. She had no idea that kindness would transform her life and, through her, transform the lives of countless others who would receive care in hospitals that prioritized compassion over profit. Sometimes, Elena reflected, the greatest fortunes are built not on what we acquire but on what we give. And the most valuable inheritance is not money, but the lesson that every person deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. Robert Harrison had taught her that, and she would spend the rest of her life honoring that lesson. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of compassion and unexpected blessings. Leave a comment sharing your own story of kindness or a time when caring for someone changed your life. We would love to hear from you.